So we're back for Boys Planet Episode 6, Take My Hand, the second mission part 1. Last week, we saw every trainee ranked from 53 to 99 eliminated. And this episode starts with yet another notice that a second voting will occur, with those ranked from 29 to 52 being next on the chopping block. Now for the boys, the night of elimination really brought it all into perspective, and just how the other boys they grew to become like friends and family to them. And it made me really want to consider that I should probably be a little bit more encouraging. Because the last thing I want is for people to not try their best out of fear of being judged and then go home with regrets. I would actually prefer trainees just try and fail. And so, of course, this sentimental moment is then pointlessly ruined by scare tactics, which is just trolling by the production crew. Like, I don't know why. Are you Silvio Santos? So yet another new Star Master, Lee Min-hyuk of BTOB, appears, and I can say this season doesn't quite feel like home to me. It's kind of lacking in the consistency that Girls Planet had, which was kind of like, I felt like it was more like a theater troupe, and they were working towards the same goal. This show, it feels a little more modular, and the lack of this consistent host thing that's going on is kind of emphasizing that for me. But, I'm not sure if the coaching team is on board in the way the coaching team was for Girls Planet 999. Like, are they more judge or mentor? I'm not really sure. Sometimes they are encouraging. And then also, evil editing doesn't really help the idea that they're on the boys' side either. But getting back to the show, the boys are now introduced to details of the second mission, which is titled the Dual Position Battle. And what this basically means is that there are 3 roles: vocal, rap, and dance, and these roles are then paired together into 3 permutations for the categories. And they contain 4 songs per category, for a total of 12 songs. Now each song is performed by a different number of trainees, and each team is evaluated independently, or rather, the members within the group are rated, probably leading to a team total. And then the highest total for each of the 3 categories will decide a winner, who gets a 100,000 point bonus, in addition to other perks like appearing on M Countdown and getting promo content in that Plus app. Now, when it comes to team selection, the way it worked in this mission was that the lowest ranked trainee could choose a song first, but then moving up the list, once a team was full, a higher ranked trainee could bump a person of their choice. And, as far as I'm aware, the bump trainee, they can only ever enter another available slot, rather than continuously bump other trainees that were lower than them. And so here, I'm sure the trainees, they considered the kinds of roles and teammates they wanted in their bumping strategies. But it seems like a few times, there are some competitive killing part assassinations going on there. I won't go through the entire shuffle, but there were some noteworthy occurrences, such as Chong Ai-chan choosing a hard song to avoid being bumped from a song he actually wanted, which I thought was kind of slightly cowardly. But then you have Yu Sung-hun, who chose the most difficult song, which is Home, right off the bat. And I thought that was actually praiseworthy. After that, you had Ricky, and he kind of got a chance to get revenge against his backdoor killing part rival, Yoon Jong-woo, by bumping him off Love Killer, which is a song Jong-woo actually really wanted. But then actually, Ricky, after that, he himself got kicked off by the person he wanted to team up with the most, which is Kim Ji-woon. So besides some surprise top 9 jackets being handed out to intimidate the other trainees, that was pretty much it. And the show went straight into song prep. So let's talk about the 12 teams, starting with those in the vocal and dance category. Love Killer is a fairly highly rated team, and it was interesting seeing Kim Ji-woon run over Matthew in asking for the killing part. And, honestly, it was slightly cringe in how he asked for it, but everyone relented as Matthew was the leader, and in the end, I do think that Kim Ji-woon was the best candidate for the killing part. The team has 3 top 9 members, except for Seo-won, who is actually one of the likable underdogs, and I would personally rate this team a 3.0 out of 4 in my average of mid rankings. This makes them the fourth highest rated team out of the 12. Based on my mid ranking, they will probably have trouble beating Jay's home team on performance, but in terms of votes, it's hard for anyone to beat this team as the average voting scale for them is about 3 to 5 times in their favor. And so what that means is that from the numbers 10 to 200, with 200 being the worst, these guys actually rank at a 29. And you compare that to Jay's team, which is at a 115. I'm not saying the at-home audience decides the winner, or if the live audience is at all a reflection of that, but you simply can't beat these guys on those metrics. And so I'm going against my sincerity score mid rankings here, and I would agree that these guys probably come out on top based on stability. And the only concern here for me was maybe Kim Gyuvin, and most of those concerns are really just backstage in prep as he's had trouble in the past. Feel Special is one of those teams which I'm kind of concerned about. They're in the bottom 2 of my sincerity rankings, and on the voting power scale, they're scored as a 159, where 200 is the worst. So in this category, they have at least the least voting power support from fans. Needless to say, there's no metric of mine that says they can win, except for a part of me that is actually a once and wants them to dominate everyone based on the popular song carry trope, which also happens to be a bingo square of mine. Now, I've never really cheered on Cha Woon-ki, but I'm doing it here out of loyalty to my girls twice, and I'm lending every ounce of prayer to this team to win. In the preps, they seem to be struggling with both confidence issues and possibly skills lacking. Since this is a vocal and dance category, they all have to demonstrate each skill, and it seems like Cha Woon-ki, he can barely even get his teammates to try, which isn't even really an option for them. So what this team needs to do is maybe lower the pitch or switch up the arrangement to suit them. This could be a beautiful slow song, and the only obstacle getting in the way of that is maybe some of the members like Cha Woon-ki, maybe he wants to vogue like in the original version, so who knows. Home was considered the hardest song by most of the trainees, and so this team, they actually have some bumped trainees, but with Jay and Yoo Sung-un, who are actually the highest ranked members of the group, they had legitimate volunteers in those two. And so the final makeup includes mostly strong vocals, actually. And that indicates to me that they have a good chance. You put Yoon Jong-woo on dance instruction, and there's a team here with basically no reason to lose. Now, my mid rankings indicate that this team should win based purely on performance, but in the voting scales, I feel like they come in second. If they really do pull off the best performance and the audience votes accordingly, they can beat the top 9 subgroup that has formed in Love Killa. But then I also want to mention that there's another pitfall for these guys in that the show, it kind of deliberately ignores Dang Hong Hai, and so I don't think they want him regaining steam as the once top ranked G group trainee. And obviously it ain't fair, but at the end of the day, the winner's benefit kind of pales in comparison to the real benefit that all trainees should have, which is showtime. And I feel like these guys, they just don't get that. So it looks like Yoo Sung will do the killing part for this one, as he has the highest voice. And I was kind of proud of him for stepping up and volunteering, to be honest. But hopefully he can actually pull it off. In terms of the voting power, where 200 is the worst, these guys have scored about 115. Butterfly is the team that is basically fighting to not come last. Only Chen Guanji is currently the only one considered safe for the next eliminations, and that's if the votes don't change at all, which they very much could. So as it is, it seems like its second highest ranked member is actually not confident enough to participate in prep testing for role distribution, which is kind of a huge mistake, and it's a major letdown for the other members. This team is actually pretty stable according to mid rankings, so I don't really know why Lim Jum Seo is kind of suddenly worried about trying to freestyle. I guess he can do it, but if he doesn't try, he's probably just going to cause problems if he doesn't kind of just pick himself up by the bootstraps and get to work. I mean, there are times when he shows that he can be confident, but he's a bit too, I feel like he needs to be more like Min Gyu or Kam Jun Hyun. So every individual evaluation here, it adds to the team's total. So you can't really be carried and you can't fly under the radar. You got to step up. Also, this team really does need its only K group guy to kind of step up here for even just like helping the guys do pronunciation, just coaching there. And so I feel like this song is probably a little bit too beautiful to not give it everything you've got. They have a chance to be carried by the song selection alone, and all they have to do is perform. And maybe the BTS army will kind of come to their rescue here. But that concludes all these guys in vocal and dance. And now we're moving on to rap and dance, where this is probably I feel like this is the closest fight that's going to happen. The four groups in rap and dance, they're very tight. Gang is basically the leftover group with pushed out leaders in Kim Jun Hyun and Lee Sung Hwan, and then there was one other guy who was also bumped. But what I like about this team is if you actually have this straight man, Sung Hwan, learning to appreciate Jun Hyun and seeing there's more to him than he did in the past. Now, in my mid rankings, this team is likely to not win. They are at a 2.4 out of 4. But in terms of voting power, they're in the third place category. And so that's mostly because of the other three members. Lee Sung-won, he can do a lot with his strong leadership skills and positive attitude. And Jun Hyun is basically high energy enough to bring those bursts of good moments to the show. My biggest concern with this group is basically Mun Jun Hyun and how poorly he's talk sung in the past. Now, I'm hoping here it's not a problem because it's rap and dance. And it seems like basically every group in rap and dance is in a similar position to theirs in that they have roughly similar voting power. And while I don't think these guys can win, I don't actually see them performing that badly for the worst ranked team in the category. Actually, what I think the top two ranks should do here is try to preserve themselves by doing the best they can to stand out. Team Zoom, led by Keita, has surprisingly the lowest voting power out of all the groups in this category. But it's a really close number. But in my mid rankings, they're actually about in the middle in terms of expected performance rankings. Now, Keita, he seems very confident that he can pull this group together, and I sort of agree with him, and my biggest concern is maybe Ollie. Now, I like Ollie, and I used to think he was a bit gangsta, but after his last team put on a soft swagger for their performance, I'm starting to wonder if maybe Ollie is more the Glee version of gangsta when it comes to actual showtime. Because behind the scenes, he seems like he's got it together, a cappella, but when he's on the stage, it kind of comes soft. Now, Haruto is probably the most legitimate one there, and I feel like Keita can pull off convincing performances, so I don't think rap will be a problem. I like Wumuti, and I hope this category is better for him than something more bubbly, as I felt he struggled with face expressions there. But I feel like he is otherwise a likable and stable performer, just like Park Hyun-bin. Now, I was surprised that Park Hyun-bin got the killing part here, but apparently everyone is okay with it. And this song, I feel like, I guess it's hard to mess up. And if there's a popular song in this whole competition that can carry a team, it should be this one. So it would be kind of embarrassing for these guys to fail, no pressure. The Law team has the second best chance of winning this, according to their voting power. In terms of my mid-rankings, they actually have the best chance. Now, it's plain to see that they have three of the best dancers. One of them is actually an Angles dictator in Park Han-bin, and he can work with Han Yoo-jin and offset any issues he has in prep. Na Kam-den has also been pretty stable despite his personal drama. Whatever they decide to do, I really just want to see what happens when Lee Yadam and Wang Zihao tear up the dance floor together. And I can't really account for their rap abilities, but I'm willing to bet you can't mess up with a masculine cheer harmony, a few whispers, and just what is mostly fast rapping on this kind of song. Now, I'm thinking this team is probably most likely to win because they're just more dangerous. Secretly, I want Gang to win, but this team is who I think will win. The main concern for this song, I feel like, is that sometimes it can get too busy, and maybe sometimes too much noise becomes white noise, and people gloss that over and they kind of lose interest. It doesn't become as dynamic, but we will see. Team Rush Hour has the strongest voting power out of any group in this category, but it's close. In terms of my mid-ranking, they're just about the middle. Now, Hiroto has always been in my top 9, so I kind of want this group to do well, but I feel like Ricky, he's probably going to get the killing part. And then you have Oh Sung-min, who's kind of been flying under the radar for me personally, but apparently he became the leader of this group and led choreo. Takuto, he struggles in prep work as usual. I've never really rated Takuto very highly. But that said, everyone here has been pretty stable. in the live stages when it came to showtime. And I haven't really seen any of them do badly. And mostly the bad things happened behind the scenes. Now, Ma Xinjiang, he's previously wanted to be sort of a Lone Ranger, and Hiroto had to tell him in the past, if you're practicing for personal benefit, there's no personal benefits if there's no team benefit. And unfortunately, I think we're going to have a repeat of that with Takedo being the catalyst. Now, Ricky is also kind of pushing to move forward with the new choreo and formation, so the lack of teamwork is kind of causing some concern for Oh Sung-min, who actually wants to help Takedo understand the original choreo first. Now, honestly, I think they just need to be clear about communicating how Takedo's individual moves may be lacking, rather than just repeatedly showing him moves and expecting him to eventually follow all the details of it. He needs basically someone like Park Han-bin, who's going to be an Angles dictator to help him. Now, if voting doesn't change, or the live audience reflects the global audience, these guys could win by a hair. And then that concludes the 4 rap and dance groups. Now, it's crazy how balanced those groups were in comparison to one another. It's kind of hard to predict who will win. Not that I have a good streak going, but they really are very close together in voting power, and also in averaged skill rankings. The next category is vocal and rap, and this is probably going to be a massacre. Find out why right now. First, you have Man in Love team, which is actually not in a bad position. The mid ranking for this team is a 2.8, but more important than that, they really don't have to dance, at least not much, and it's not really necessary for this category. Kim Tae-rae, obviously, he can do vocals to an extent, and I don't know whether to look at him as a blessing for the rest or to pity him because of the rest. But let's take a closer look for a second, because a lot of guys here, they wanted to do this song, and Min Gyu, despite his natural comedic ability, is actually a man of pure effort. We have Lee Dong-yeol, who unexpectedly cracks and doesn't know his limits yet. We have Choi Woo-jin, who used to have great hair and is getting flatter with each appearance, and he's basically whispering the song. And then we have Jung Min-kyu, who has no restraint at all and loudly sings in an off way though, and that shocks the people around him. Now, I can kind of understand why Min-kyu is so loud, as he wants exposure to survive, and maybe that's his personality. And then Woo-jin in 51st place is basically close enough to accept that maybe he won't survive, but he needs to make sure he doesn't harm his image so he can maintain a possible career outside of the show. Now, I thought Woo-jin was actually one of the better visuals early on, but it looks like he's had no showtime, and maybe his meager appearing skills have affected his confidence, because he looks down and out, and his hair keeps getting flatter, as I mentioned. In this category, this team is basically in 3rd place in terms of voting power, but that's kind of irrelevant since the big elephant in the room has 3 to 4 times the voting power of any other team in this category, and these guys are basically fighting to survive for individual scores rather than win. Team Limousine has the lowest voting power of all teams, but in my mid-rankings, they are the 2nd best in terms of skill and talent, which isn't saying much because one team just basically outshines everyone just so easily. And so I don't really expect the guys to do poorly, but I don't expect them to win. But all 3 of these guys, they're actually stable, and they don't have to dance. And I'm sure their song will require some kind of visual narrative that must at all costs avoid trying to look cheesy. So except for Anthony, the other 2 members are actually probably more at risk. So hopefully they make space for all 3 to shine. And also, Christian was allowed to praise the K-group member and have it edited into the show. So that seems to be working well for him. And I'm starting to see how kind of the language barrier plays a role in being kind of a nuisance with regards to these teams being able to work together. Now, Anthony, he was actually looking a bit sad here, and I don't know if he's ill or worried about his group's voting power, but I think that if his base stays strong, he'll actually be safe. Of course, we get a hint later on at the end of the show that maybe Anthony isn't actually safe. But I did notice that he got the killing part in this, which I'm concerned about. Now, I think it would have made more sense for the other 2 members to play a killing part, because I feel like Jihu, he looks way more average, and for that reason it makes him more kind of relatable to the idea of a person struggling. And then even Christian, he's kind of an outsider, and so it kind of gives a reason to believe that he would have the struggles of, I don't know what story they're going for, but the team's main goal basically should be to make the audience weep. And they should play up the theatrics from the story angle without kind of looking too much at the audience, just kind of having it be a show that they are watching from afar. Now, not Spring Love or Cherry Blossom's team is probably the one I'm most concerned about. Uh, Probably because it's very hard to say the name of the team, and so maybe I'll just call them Team IU. But in terms of voting power, they're actually not in the worst position because of Lee Da-eul and Mak Do-ha, and that puts them in a second place position. But then we'll later find out that those guys drop significantly in the rankings. But those are just initial rankings. They don't represent the long-term voting. So, but in terms of my mid-ranking, they're kind of in dire straits. They're in the bottom two, actually, and they don't have the benefit of singing Catchy Twice song here, so they're not going to get the same treatment. Actually, they chose a hard song, and two of them can't even really sing in this group, while the third and lowest ranked just recently choked on stage. And so, luckily for them, dancing is not a requirement, and maybe they can divide the rap, but really, I think they're one member short for this kind of a performance. Mak Do-ha, he has a deep voice, and he can probably sing well enough, though I'm not sure how he raps. I'm looking forward to seeing it, actually. But oddly enough, I think he'll have to be the one to do multiple sections. Lee Da-eul, he basically has no choice but to rap, and there's a good section for him to do that, actually. I think that it fit him well, if he can actually rap. I look forward to Jung Ha-chan's redemption here. And you see, even though I never forget how badly people mess up, and I always repeat and bring up their mistakes, I almost never actually hold a grudge against them, and I always hope for them to improve. So, let's run a game plan for Jung Ha-chan here. He has to sing well. That's the main starting point for him. And the second thing is, he has to step up and maybe show rap. There are so few members in this group that he actually has a real chance to stand out, even though the other two are basically very visual, just standout people. He should also try kind of acting during the performance, and as a leader, he has a say in how that works out. I'm rooting for these boys to survive. It's probably likely that no one can defeat the main threat in this category, so you gotta kind of have a different goal, which is to get themselves highlighted and saved and entertain people. That's it. So Team Tomboy is basically the top 9 subunit. Park Gun-wook is just one spot off, but the show considers the top 9 candidates. So, to me, their voting power should be massive. Now, on a scale from 10 to 200, with 10 being the best, 200 being the worst, these guys are at a 23. And so, in terms of voting power, they're basically the top team out of all the 12. In terms of my mid-rankings, they're at a 3.5, which is also the top team out of all 12. And so everything says that these guys will win in terms of metrics. And the only thing that says otherwise is Mnet's evil editing. So in this team, Sung Han-bin, he takes the killing part again, it seems. But I feel like Gun-wook has the roguish looks for an idol lead. Like, So-yeon is just basically fierce, and when Gun-wook turns it on, he's basically like, Raphael from the Ninja Turtles, and he can also make a song more masculine. Now, finally, Zhang Hao, he gets a bit sussy for the gunny after seeing he is not that scary and intimidating. He actually says that he's cute in his demeanor, and so that was funny. And then also, Zhang Hao, he wants to get the killing part too, citing how often he's been overlooked for it. There's a short montage about how he's always been kind of basically one step away from it. And then also, Leo Tech also wants to do the killing part, and he actually got to do a demo tryout for it, and he was not bad, actually. I thought he was actually good. But I think maybe for voting politics, it's kind of actually impossible for anyone but Sung Han-bin to get the killing part. Now, you'll basically need, like, a coach to tell Sung Han-bin in practice that he's too feminine for that role. And then I feel like Gun-wook would probably have to be nominated by a coach to offset it. I mean, is that offensive to say that, like, I don't think Sung Han-bin should take this killing part? He'll look too kind of weirdly feminine. But I don't know. Anyway, I just can't really conceive of any reason other than that why this group would lose this. It would have to be a dumb as hell reason for them not to win. So with that, this basically concludes a scatter over of all the teams' rankings and predictions. In case I wasn't clear, here's actually a summary of my predictions. In terms of expected voting power and allegiances, Tomboy wins, Rush Hour wins, and Love Killer wins. In terms of my mid-ranking sincerity skills predictions, which hasn't been doing too well, is probably worse than flipping a coin. Tomboy wins, Law wins, and Home wins. Now, in terms of my personal predictions, I think Tomboy will win, Law will win, and Love Killa should win. But who I want to win are Tomboy, Gang, and Love Killa. And so, across the board, you can see that Tomboy is winning in all the metrics. In terms of other teams, Law is probably more guessed to win. And then in the other voting guesses, Love Killa is most likely to win. So if you just went with my personal predictions, I feel like that probably fits best in terms of averaging everything. So lucky us, Mnet actually graced us with a few performances in the second half of the episode, and that kind of makes some of my predictions pointless. Now, obviously, I'm actually scripting this after the fact, but I'm showing the consistency in my process so you can kind of understand how, this is not affected by knowing the final outcome regardless. Now, the first group to perform was Gang. They came out dressed for the part. Seunghwan was basically transformed into a JoJo character, and he looked good for the part. Now, it doesn't look like him, but on the stage, it was convincing. In preps, Seunghwan basically fell in love with Kim Jun-hyun, as his artistic dancer side showed passion and dedication, and it went against his normal loudness, which is like, it's basically like, almost like Kim Jun-hyun is Naruto, and that's kind of the vibe he gives off, but then he's actually really talented and skilled, which is worthy of respect. Now, during self-evaluation, they were praised. In the actual performance, Seunghwan started strong, with the group at a 7.7, and there was no decline in this group's performance. It was pure acceleration until they landed at an 8.4. I loved it. They exceeded expectations for me. Seunghwan was good in the killing part, and he looked professional. In another part, Jung Hyun did something funny with fake abs, poking fun at Ji Woong, saying, notice me, Ji Woong, and they actually all looked good on stage, and I could see them as a debut group, actually. The top performer got 700 points, and it was Lee Seung-wan. The next team to perform was Zoom. Their costumes, I felt like they were kind of weak, like sabotage levels of weak. It's basically a killing ground for a G group here. Now, who would zoom in on these outfits? I don't know. It's like an 80s track and field video. In preps, Haruto was teaching the killing part to Park Hyun-bin, which was kind of telling, like, you needed to be taught the killing part. Like, why isn't Haruto just the killing part? At self-evaluation, Park Hyun-bin actually messes up, and he starts to wonder if he should pass it up. But then, like, the team, they take a vote on it, and they decide to maintain his position. And I feel like maybe that was easier to do because the team did overwhelmingly get predicted as the winner from the other trainees. So I guess they were kind of confident in themselves. But in the performance, they started at a 7.4 and they rose to a 7.9. From what I saw, Haruto was very good. Harmonies were on it. They did a really good job, actually. And Keita, he had a strong rap section. Now, overall, I actually felt it was a weak start, but had a strong finish. And the weak part for me was actually Ollie, and it was his Glee-style gangsta, which detracted from the song for me. The more I looked at it, it felt like, was Park Hyun-bin really the killing part in this performance? I didn't really notice him that much. After the performance, though, Keita got the top score at 736, and Park Hyun-bin got the lowest at 656, which isn't actually that bad. The next team was Home. The outfits were kind of lacking here. It's like if everyone died and their dads were suddenly 20 years old, and then some of them were switched up and dressed like moms. But I guess it kind of fits the theme's color. In preps, Jong-woo took over the leadership role, and he also led choreography. And while his team praised him, he was pressured and stressed from it all. Perhaps he saw that they weren't doing that well, and it made it harder for him to see how he could bring them to the place where he kind of set out for them to arrive at. Still, I thought it was funny that he was trying to stay positive and tell his teammates that they were doing better than they were when they clearly weren't. Like, I was just watching it. It's like, really? Why is he praising Jay? Jay was slow here. However, in interim checks, Master Choi basically told him that the choreo, it was too hard for this group, and when he heard them sing, they did a good job, but other than that, it's basically impossible for these guys to learn the dance in the time they have. Also, they were missing vocal parts and kind of skipping on that for the sake of the dance in their interim checks. Now, by rehearsal, they scaled it all back, and they were actually praised for it on the dance, and they still had some bad notes, though, and it was suggested that they go half a note lower, which it kind of hurt some people's pride, but they did listen. Now, in the performance, they started at a lower 7.0 because it was kind of laid back, but it rose. And Dang Hong Hai was actually really good in his part, I felt. And though Seung Hyun, he actually cracked twice, which kind of pulled the points down a bit. but later it did recover. The performance was mostly good, and it ended on a 7.6. Now, I wanted these guys to do better, but I guess Sung Yeon was kind of overconfident about himself. But everyone was saying that he recovered. After the performance, Jong Woo got the top points, which was only 660, which is basically the same amount of points as one of the lower members in another group. Dang Hong Kai got 580, which is actually the lowest score I've seen so far. Now, the next team was Love Killa, and they came out dressed to stand out. I'm not sure who decided the cuts on everyone, but Ji-woong probably looked the most natural. In preps, Matthew took leadership and was pressured by it. Everyone casually went along with it, but Ji-woong seemed to hold back some concerns. Now, Matthew, he seemed concerned with a lot of small details, and we got to see him exposed here, kind of in the face of burden. And, I was just saying recently that Matthew, he could kind of avoid certain types of growth because of his growing fan base supporting him. And I did expect him to reach certain obstacles, but then, like, in the last review, I basically said, oh, it looks like he could just skip that hurdle. But now we're seeing he actually he has to deal with the responsibility of his teammates, and this isn't something that he can really escape the pressure of. Now, usually the hardest part of being in a difficult situation like this is accepting how hard it is to kind of just go through it, and then humbling yourself enough to realize that you may not come out perfect, but you can work diligently, and the outcome will be the best you can manage. You can't always solve a puzzle in 0 moves, so just accept that there is work. In interim checks, they ended up having an unstable performance. Master Choi asked if they actually had skill or if they were getting by on character, which is kind of funny because it reflects what I was thinking. And I can kind of see it hitting home for some of them. Kim Gyuvin basically had another bad interim check. And I actually started to feel bad for Matthew here at this point, because as he got more depressed and he kind of made these weird facial expressions, it kind of reminded me of Dr. Park from Good Doctor. But eventually they showed him getting a pep talk from Ji-woong. And in my mind, I feel like he must have had that backroom interview, and then the producers probably prodded at Ji-woong to go cheer him up and give him a pep talk. Like, it was probably clear to Ji-woong. It's like, okay, so this team absolutely wants Matthew to be in the final. And it reminded me of when G Group was kind of crying about the language barrier and also their own timidity. And then it required Kim Chae-young basically interrupting an interview, probably prodded by a producer as well. She basically showed up with psychic powers, and then she decided to listen to their troubles and act as a liaison to the rest of her team, which were K Group members, and they just needed to talk to them about slowing down for the J Group guys. Now, Ji-woong basically went up to Matthew and empathized with him, telling him, it's hard, right? That's the way it is. Accept it. Don't think of it as failing on your behalf, which is making it a more difficult thing than it normally would be. Think of it more that, you have to know it's hard, and you have to do the work. Do it without the guilt, because you're not causing it. It just is hard. And you have to apply whatever solutions you think are best to move forward in a timely manner. In the actual performance, they started at a 7.6. And they briefly dropped to 7.5 because, from my perspective, Kim Gyuvin, he's very tall, and he seemed out of place in the back and kind of slow. But this could have also just been the long lens of an action camera, which kind of does that. If you guys watch, like, Michael Bay movies, whenever they pan around characters, they use very distant cameras to move very fast. And it makes, like, a lot of, like, things appear to be kind of, like, moving fast. But anyways, they rose multiple times, and then they got an 8.0. Now, Seo won. He actually had really interesting vocals, and everyone had an impactful performance overall. Now, general feedback from the trainees seemed to be that the sexiness was excessive. So sexy, please don't do it! But I thought it was just the right amount. And after the performance, Kim Gyuvin got top trainee, which surprised me actually, but not as much as it surprised him. And also, there was an edit there about Ji-woong saying he felt like he was stolen from him, which I'm not sure if is because I've seen Ji-woong take many slights and disappointments on the show without reacting, and he was actually the first to congratulate Kim Gyuvin from my perspective, so I'm not sure I believe that this is a legitimate edit. The last team aces was for the song Tomboy. This is a different category for vocal and rap. They didn't show the performance, and it was a cliffhanger, but in terms of before that, their outfits were kind of girl crushy, and I was kind of worried it would go this way. I was hoping it would go heavier and more masculine. Now, in preps, they did well and were able to perform without modifications, and they were even told that they were debut ready, which isn't kind of surprising given their mid-ranking score and their voting scale scores. Now, there's really no good reason these guys shouldn't do well. Although a cliffhanger edit shows Han Bin crying in the dorms, which is the first time I've ever seen him break down. And, I always gave him a hard time for the lack of sincerity. But if he is crying here, then that would show that he's kind of more human there and he has concerns. And that's actually more of what I want to see from Sung Han Bin. So until next week, we really will see the outcome of some performances and battles. It appears from scoring that Love Killa may have overwhelmingly defeated Home and Zoom narrowly beats Gang, though this is pending based on scores for each individual member. Next, we're shown some original singles and choreography samples for the upcoming mission, and I won't comment on them right now. I just really don't want to do that. I don't want to do it until I see or hear the full thing. But even then, I don't really want to consume side content. And so, we'll just wait until it appears in the show and we'll see how they do. Then we get some live voting results, which is a little shocking because compared to the last ranks from their elimination day, if you keep in mind that voting has barely been open long, I guess you can expect more changes to come here. But there were some shocking changes, and the most notable deltas were Yoon Jong-woo climbing 22 spots upwards, which is like huge. Kai Jin climbing 24 spots as well, and I don't even know where that guy's coming from. Like, why is he doing that well? Is he that noticeable? I didn't really even notice this guy. And then you have Lee Da-ul dropping 33 spots, which to me is like the universe finding balance. Because I don't think he was ever meant to be that as high as he was. I mean, he had a good smile and he has good, like, when you first see him, he seems cheerful. But then, like, you see his attitude behind the scenes and he's like, I'm not sure if he is that guy. He's just kind of, like, blessed with his smile. And then his performing is kind of, like, not that great. Now, there's one more spot about Lee Hwan-hee leaving for health reasons, but I don't really feel like it's worth getting into other than you see Park Gun-wook cry on his behalf. And maybe Park Gun-wook isn't really the roguish bad guy everyone makes him out to be. So overall, I'm thinking mid-rankings aren't really that good at predicting performance, just based on these final performance ratings by me. And I don't think they're on track for predicting song winners either, so I don't know about that. I guess I have to look more into it. Also, I didn't really factor in real-time voting results for the voting scale or voting power metric. So you can't really trust the voting power here because if you go by the current voting ranks, a lot of them change. And so maybe they're not that good at predicting. Now, I recall saying earlier that Anthony would be safe, but judging by these rankings here, he's actually not safe at all. Actually, 6 people went into the safe zone and 6 people fell out, which is basic and obvious math, but I guess that's pretty much it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you don't like it, give it a thumbs down. Also, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing, and then I'll see you in the next video.